rock. Alrighty, folks. What is this, episode 14? Like, I'm asking you like you would know.
I have not been keeping track of the number. I think
this is 14. Welcome, everybody, to episode 14, if that's what this is. We've got my friend Marissa Dowalter-Miracle, which I don't believe I've used your full hyphenated name before. So
it's way too long, so I sometimes introduce myself just with my maiden name only. Because I especially have been finding that at work. It's like kind of just like annoying to have like a super long last name to have then people remember that. So sometimes I cut it to one or the other.
Hey, whatever works. It's all good. That's awesome. So Marissa and I have been friends 10 years. Happy 10.
Oh, yay. Happy 10. That is true.
Yeah. I was talking with Rob, and Rob agreed to do one of these as well. So that'll be fun. But I was talking to Rob, as I mentioned to you before we started, and realized that it had been 10 years. And so we were like, hey, cheers to the randomness that is our relationship. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I sort of thought that time would last forever. And here we are, at least speaking, me, you and Rob, we all live in different states, separate from each other. So
yeah,
that's a little interesting. So as far as, well, let's talk about what you're up to. Where are you right now? And what are you currently doing? And then we'll go from there.
I am in beautiful, sunny Las Vegas, Nevada. I moved out here in February and took a job as a wildlife biologist for the Bureau of Land Management. And I work for Red Rock Canyon National Conservation Area and Sloan Canyon National Conservation Area. So I'm their wildlife biologist, taking care of all those cool Mojave Desert
taking
species.
Care of what?
The cool Mojave Desert wildlife species, basically.
So. Oh, okay. Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. So yeah, there's going to be some vocab I'll probably ask you some questions on just for clarification. But okay, Bureau of Land Management, how did you get involved with them?
So I did my undergrad when I first met Jake. Is actually around the time when I changed my major from undecided to wildlife and conservation biology at Ohio University. And following getting my undergrad degree, I kind of didn't really know what exactly I wanted to do with it. I knew I wanted to work with animals, but I thought about kind of going towards a policy side of things for a little while. And because I wasn't sure if I wanted to do graduate school or not, I thought I would take a few years to try some different things, do some seasonal jobs, and figure out exactly if, one, I would need to go to graduate school, because after doing 4 years of undergrad, especially taking like comparative vertebrate anatomy my last semester, I was like, I don't know if I could do this.
Comparative vertebrate anatomy?
Yeah, it was a really tough class, whereas like human anatomy, you're just like focusing on the human body, but for comparative vertebrate anatomy, you're going across the tree of life for all vertebrates and learning all kinds of different things about their organ systems, the way their skeletal structure is, and a lot of it is looking at what's called homologies or homologous characters. So those are characteristics that through evolution have changed form, but they all originated from the same thing in the common ancestor. So for example, our finger bones are equivalent to the bones in a bat's wing.
Gotcha. So I
compare those features and learn a lot about the vertebrate tree of life, basically. But it was a very difficult class, lots of memorization, and I was intimidated by graduate school, and didn't want to do it if I didn't have to. Probably a little bit just for my own, like, not sure if I would be successful in graduate school and if I would even want to go into like academia, because I did think briefly about being a professor or something, but after going to graduate school, I decided, no, I'm not going to do that.
Sure.
But yeah, I did my seasonal work for a little bit. I got to do some really cool things. I had an internship with the Audubon Society, which was really fun. Got my feet wet in bird stuff, which was
Yeah,
nice.
that was a pretty big part of your undergrad, I feel like, for some of your ornithology classes.
Yeah, I mean, my ornithology class is where I met my husband, so
True.
definitely was a big feature.
We
At
went on a
least
bird
when I took
watching.
that.
I went bird watching with you one time. I can't remember for what we were doing, but around the Ridges sort of area.
I was that might have been when I was assigned to do like a transect or something as part of like my field ecology class,
And
or
what's that word?
a transect. So
Transect.
that's when you
Okay.
set up a well, I guess it doesn't have to be a straight line, but for birds, it's often just a straight line of a set distance, and you walk along that line and you stop at intervals and make observations,
That's what we did.
and then you wait for a set amount of time, and then you record what you observed over that set period of time, and then you move to the next part.
Yes, that is exactly what we did. Real quick, why didn't you think you would do well in grad school? I'm curious as to that answer.
So I think as a society, we have put like graduate education on this pedestal where it's like you have to be a certain caliber of person to be able to succeed in like a graduate program. Um, that's
Caliber
not really what
person
I
in
found.
terms of like intelligence or in terms of
Yeah,
what?
yeah.
Okay.
Well, both in terms of intelligence and in terms of drive.
Mm,
You have to be willing to, well, and I did find this particular case to be true. You have to be willing to make your life all about that thing.
okay.
Which for some people, that's totally fine. They're like super into it. But for me, I like a work life balance, and I was not successful in achieving that. I don't think that you can have a successful work life balance as a graduate student in most cases. There are some
Okay.
people who, and some programs too that I'm sure are different, but in my particular program, it was a pretty common theme amongst all of us that we were just running on fumes constantly with all of our school stuff going on. But since we were also employees of the university as teaching assistants, um, on top of our own research and our own classes that we were taking, we also had that. We either had to be in the classroom for several hours a week, and then also be preparing lesson plans and preparing lectures and grading stuff. So it was a lot.
Fully
Most
immersed.
stressful like 2 to 3 years of my life. It
Oh,
took me 3 years, but I was only a teaching assistant for 2.
gotcha. Okay, so definitely most stressful. And so going back to your point, you were saying society, you think, puts it on a pedestal.
Yeah, so I was like unsure if I was good enough, smart enough to be able to like do well in a graduate program. And I think that particular thing is a total myth. There are all kinds of different people who can be successful in a graduate program. You don't have to go in. And I also felt like I didn't know enough going in. Like I wasn't expert enough to be able to like go and basically take off running in a graduate program.
Okay, I follow.
And yeah, I just did not find that to be the case. You can have all kinds of different people. You don't have to be a great test taker. You don't have to have any sort of, I guess there's like a minimum, I guess, but there's not really like certain threshold. You have to be like straight A's
Gotcha.
type of thing. Like I had a lot of people in my program who were not that strong academically in their undergrad, but through just working in their own like drive and passion for what they did, that's what was a motivating factor for them. And in graduate school, one of the nice things is that you only take the classes that it's like structured very differently than undergrad, where you have all these gen eds that you have to knock out.
Yeah.
There are a couple of requirements that you have to take, but it all has to do with your specific specialty. So even though, for example, I had to take biostatistics as one of my required classes. Like that helps you.
Yeah, I was about to say it helps with
your
research,
ultimate
right?
goal.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Interesting. So it's and I don't mean this in a well, I don't know what kind of way, but it strikes me odd that you would not think yourself up to the intelligence task and with regards to grad school. And because obviously from my perception, and maybe not obviously, but obviously I believe and can pretty objectively say you're an intelligent person. So where do you think that was coming from?
I think it's, again, that like society thing where it's like, oh, if you have a PhD, you're like so incredibly like out of this world smart. And I didn't really see myself that way.
Okay.
I felt like a very normal person, not like an egghead type person, you know?
Gotcha.
So I guess feeling like that made it more difficult to accept that I could do it. But then eventually I got to that point where I'm like, you know what? I like research enough. And I think that this will ultimately get me into a place in my career where I don't have to continue doing seasonal jobs and moving all over the place. And I can actually like settle down in one place and have a consistent employment, basically.
Sure.
That's
So
one of
that
the hardest things about seasonal work is you're constantly moving around. It can be really cool if you're a single person, young, right out of college, not really sure where you want to settle down. You can try a lot of different things in a short amount of time, but just constantly having to apply for jobs and move around was really difficult. So
yeah, definitely a trade-off.
And COVID
there.
happened, and so seasonal work
That's
dried out
true.
big time.
That's true.
I got stuck working in a brewery for 2 years between my seasonal jobs and
that place was
going to
cool
grad
though. What was that
school,
called?
Forbidden Root. Shout out
Forbidden
Forbidden
Root.
Hey,
Yeah.
any Forbidden Root people watching this?
Yeah, they had some good wings.
Yeah, they had really good food. I haven't been there in a long time, but
That makes sense.
Forbidden Root in Easton and Columbus. Check it out.
Yeah, shout out. That place was dope. Okay, so you were kind of talking about your rationalization for committing was just stability, research is good enough. Were there any sort of other things that kind of helped you iron out that decision?
So, my seasonal work with Stone Laboratory was definitely a big part of that. I got to do
talk about that.
I got to work on a population ecology project, working with the Lake Erie water snake, which is a formerly federally threatened species that has been since delisted and has recovered. They were featured in a Dirty Jobs episode.
Sick.
Actually, my boss took Mike Rowe around on Put-in Bay, and they caught a bunch of snakes. She basically showed him what she did for her dissertation work, just catching lots of snakes, regurgitating them, and getting bitten up, getting crapped on, musked, and so I got to do that for a summer. And even though, it sounds like a dirty job, it's actually very fun. The worst part is definitely what you smell like at the end of the day, but what's more thrilling than like catching something that's gonna bite you, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. That is thrilling. How long did you live there? And that was through OSU, right?
Yeah, so Stone Laboratory is a kind of like a satellite campus for OSU, but it's also a research facility in its own right. So they have summer classes for OSU students and anybody who wants to take classes there that mostly deal with science. So they have things like ecology classes, limnology, which is the study of freshwater lakes, all kinds of things that you can study there that are kind of related to that environmental science topic. But I was there for a pretty short time in 2019. It was from, I think, April through the end of October. And my plan was to come back the season of 2020, but then COVID happened and OSU completely shut down hiring of any seasonals. So I couldn't go back for, I guess, was that 2 summers? Yeah. So I actually only officially worked there full time as Kristen Stanford's research assistant for 1 summer. But it had a huge impact on me.
I felt like you were there for longer.
It's because I went back 2 years later in the summer of 2021 to work for Kelly's Island State Park. So still on the lake,
gotcha.
But I was on a different island in Lake Erie.
Right.
And I actually worked 3 jobs that summer. I was full-time essentially for the state park. I worked as the field station assistant for Kelly's Island Field Station, which is an organization that kind of does a lot of outreach, environmental science outreach education with kids. And they also do some conservation projects around the island.
Okay.
And then I also worked part-time as Kristen's research assistant again that summer, but I was mostly on Kelly's, and it was in a lot more diminished capacity than my previous position because I was only working part-time, and the OSU still had some restrictions regarding seasonal stuff.
And so how was your day sort of divided up, or your week sort of divided up when you were there in 2021?
Definitely was dependent on the weather and what certain events were going on. So sometimes I would have weeks where I'd just be mostly putting all my time towards the state park. But luckily, my manager there, it's a very small team, as you can imagine, like a small island. And I think we had like maybe 5 or 6 full-time people. And so the manager there was just super understanding, and that he had relationships, like working relationships with both Jackie from the field station and Kristen. So he was willing to share like me and my hours with them. So
nice.
Several like 50, 60-hour weeks, but like nothing crazy like I'm running ragged. And with our work with the Lake Erie water snake, it's at least that year you kind of want to get similar numbers of captures from year to year, but you're not going out and sampling every single day. So you choose like a good weather day to go to one site and visit it, and we would hopefully hit it like 3 or 4 times depending on the site. Every summer. And I'm trying to add up in my head how many sites there were. Like 5 or 6 different ones. So wasn't anything crazy. But then you have the data side on the back end of that, where you want to make sure you have everything entered into the database.
Yeah, you got stuff to do, no doubt.
Yeah.
Was it the same crew both times, or did like all the same people come back, or was it just you and then a whole new group?
So I was actually the only research assistant for Kristen in my season of 2019.
Okay, gotcha.
And
I guess I was just thinking about your like roommate situation. So I wasn't sure how that worked out in terms of what they did versus what you did. Okay.
So the people I worked with at Stone Lab before, most of them were biological field station assistants. So rather than having a focus on like a specific research thing, they would help with the, basically the day-to-day stuff with the field station. So in the summer times, they would be assisting the professors and classes with what they were doing. In the off season, so spring and fall, we would have elementary schools and high schools come and do field trips to Stone Lab, and they would spend the night in the dorms and get to do all kinds of cool stuff, go on science cruises in the lake, do stuff in the water lab. So kind of helping to run those field trips and doing the interpretive part of it. And also just like maintenance activities. So they'd pull weeds and just do general maintenance things for the boats.
Whatever needed to be done, sort of thing.
A little bit different than my position, but we still worked closely together because every once in a while I would need extra bodies to help me catch snakes. So I would
Sure.
rope them into coming with me.
So, you're performing research there. And it doesn't, I'm talking for both 2019, 2021, you're gathering the snakes, you're doing all these things. And then there's also these educational components happening with folks coming to the islands. What are the objectives? Like, what is the objectives of these islands? Like, is it research, education, a little bit of both? Like why do they exist?
Definitely.
Okay.
So for Stone Lab, they're obviously part of OSU, so education is a huge component of what they do there. Mm-hmm. A lot of it revolves around those summer courses that are being taught there through OSU and those school field trips. And we also have staff there that go to schools and take some of our education animals and do like in-school programs regarding environmental science. So education, inarguably a huge component of Stone Lab, but there's also a lot of research that goes on there. It acts as kind of a station for visiting researchers a lot. So researchers from other universities will come to Stone Lab to conduct different experiments, just have a place to stay on the islands because obviously Put in Bay can be a little expensive. It's the visa of Ohio, basically.
And distracting.
Yeah, definitely. But very fun, very cool place to live.
Oh, definitely.
So research is definitely a big part of it too. So those are the main two things, but kind of working hand in hand.
Yeah. Well, I remember during one of the OSU games, all of a sudden there was a commercial for Stone Labs, and there you were on the TV. I was like, oh my God, this is crazy.
Yeah, that commercial was a big deal when it was happening because there's a whole big... the logistics behind the filming stuff was like very complicated. So we were running all over the place to be all kinds of different places to assist with things. And I happened to be able to be in the background of Kristen talking about her water snake stuff. So
that was very cool. Well, that's awesome. Okay. So 2019, 2021, you're at Naughty Pine, right? That's what it's called.
What
was the place you worked at called? The brewery?
Oh,
Forbidden Root. Naughty Pine's a different place. Okay, so you were at you were there in the meantime in between the 2019 and 2021 research gigs. What happens after 2021 after you finish with Kelly's Island?
So after that I start my master's program.
Back at OU.
Yeah, back at OU. I decided to go back to OU. Well, one, because COVID. Bless COVID for this. A lot of the universities dropped their requirement for taking the what's it called? The GRE. So the graduate exam, basically, that it's kind of like the ACT or the SAT, but to go into graduate school. So a lot of schools were dropping that because nobody could take the GRE and they didn't want to lose those enrollments of potential graduate students.
Yeah, sure.
So because they dropped
That's funny.
I was able to slide right in there. Basically, I reached out to my undergraduate advisor, and he encouraged me to apply to his program. And I actually ended up being co-advised by him and another faculty member who had just joined the university. And I got to continue my water snake stuff there, which was pretty awesome. I moved from population ecology to population genetics. So that's what my master's research dealt with. And I just...
Population genetics.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. And so what does that mean?
Basically, you're studying the genetics of populations. So there's...
Sure.
It's exactly what it sounds like. But so it's a little bit more broad scale. You're not looking at what specific genes do. You're looking at how closely related are specific populations. What kinds of, microevolutionary mechanisms are happening there. So is there interbreeding, something called gene flow between populations? Are they becoming more and more distinct because they're isolated from each other?
Sure.
Looking at those kinds of questions. And also has to do with kind of like speciation as well. So,
Yes.
and taxonomy. So is this population its own new thing, or is it
Right.
just kind of a subcomponent of this larger thing?
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, since you said you listened to every episode 2, we talked to my friend Kendall King, and she kind of did some similar things with wasps, and they speciate at a crazy rate. And so shout out Kendall for getting me up to speed for this episode.
Yeah, that was super interesting. I hope you have her back on.
Yeah, well, I think she's got some topics ready to go for another one. I'll definitely have her on again. Okay, was there anything cool that you felt like you discovered while you were doing your program? Because obviously it was rigorous, and maybe it wasn't your favorite thing ever, and you were kind of going balls to the wall. But what were the cool things? What did you learn? What did you discover? That sort of thing.
So the biggest thing, this is still kind of preliminary because I need to do some more sequencing of samples, which are in the works right now. But currently the Lake Erie water snake is classified as a subspecies of the common water snake, which is, so it's split into 4 different subspecies, with the Lake Erie water snake being one of them. The other one that's closest to the Lake Erie water snake is the northern water snake. It occupies the largest territory of the overall range of the common water snake. And it's the one that you find on the shores of Lake Erie. So the Lake Erie water snake is only found on the islands.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Well, there's some caveats to that,
sure,
but I won't get into the nitty gritty of that.
Yeah,
if anybody
that's
wants to read my thesis, then they can find out all the juicy details.
Where would someone find that?
They won't be able to find it unless they email me. But if they email me, I will send it to them.
Okay. Is it like on a link or something, or would it just have to be something that you would send them?
I would have to send it.
Okay, gotcha.
I can't publish it yet because if it were to be uploaded to Ohio Link, which is Ohio University's like host for their theses and dissertations, then it might prevent me from publishing in a journal. So
gotcha.
There's weird rules about
sure. Okay, cool.
So.
Well, that's good to know though. If someone wants it, nice.
Yeah. So I lost my train of thought
So there's the ones on the shores that are the northern ones, and then there's the ones only on the islands are the Lake Erie ones. Yeah.
Yes. So in kind of previous studies that have been done, which there has not really been any genetic work done on them other than some studies on allozymes, which are basically before sequencing was really able to be done on a large scale. They use these proteins that are called allozymes that you can basically infer the genotype of that individual based on the shape of that particular enzyme made from a particular gene.
Okay, so I follow that.
These specific enzymes could be isolated and then used to infer the genotype of individuals. But usually those studies only have like a sample size as far as loci, which are like the specific areas of the genome, of like 7 per individual, whereas my final data set had close to 10,000 loci per sample. So the kinds of things that you can like say specifically about populations using allozymes is a lot, your conclusions are a lot less strong, a lot less robust than these larger data sets we're able to get now.
Okay,
so the previous kind of, going back to the actual topic.
Please.
The traditional like knowledge, I guess, or thinking of it based off those allozyme studies was that there is this selection gene flow balance that's happening between our northern water snakes that are living on the mainland side and the Lake Erie water snakes that occupy the islands. There are a lot of individuals on the islands that look indistinguishable from those that live on the mainland. They have that strongly banded pattern on their bodies. However, one of the main features of a Lake Erie water snake is that you have a lot of individuals on the island that don't have any pattern at all. They're just gray. So the thinking was that something about not having those strong bands is actually advantageous for you as a water snake on the islands, especially because they have those really iconic, I guess, Alvar limestone shores. So you just have basically straight limestone occupying the shoreline where all of those snakes are living. Whereas on the mainland, that's not really the case. You have a lot of vegetation. There's a lot more varied habitats that water snakes are going to occupy. So it was kind of thought that kind of polymorphism. So that means when you have individuals that exhibit a bunch of different traits, because on the islands you can be banded strongly like a northern water snake, or you can have you can be somewhere in the middle, or you can have no pattern at all.
Okay. Yep.
So the kind of influx of genes from the mainland is preventing the banding pattern from being lost to selection. Does that make sense?
Can you say that one more time?
So natural selection is selecting for the unbanded phenotype on the islands.
Yes.
Whereas our mainland populations are introducing those banded genes back in at the same or similar rate as it's being lost to natural selection.
Okay, gotcha. Yep. Perfect. Thank you.
So that was kind of the thinking of why this polymorphism is able to be maintained, evolutionarily speaking. And so they found also that there was some diversification happening too, I guess, between the two populations. Mm-hmm. So they found support that, they weren't getting enough gene flow to really say that they're the same thing. But my findings with all of my data using neutral loci, which is important for making those kinds of inferences, because selection messes up a lot of things when you're trying to tell if something is taxonomically the same thing as another thing.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
That there's not really very much difference between the mainland and the islands, and that what we're seeing is kind of more like an ecotype. So it's a population that has some specific phenotypic features, but if you're looking at the totality of their genome, so all of their genetics, there's not really that much difference between our mainland and our island sites. And in fact, our two most different sites were both mainland sites, and they were adjacent to each other on my map of my sample sites. So they weren't that far away from each other, but they were vastly different, which was super surprising. And that's why I need more samples to figure out what the heck is happening there.
Oh, but
it's a little preliminary. Cool. It's not something that I'm basically leaving it up to other people to decide if they want to retire that subspecies based off of that. I definitely want more samples before I would kind of say that we should call them the same thing.
Okay, yeah.
And yeah, but it was definitely surprising, especially because this has been the convention since the 1940s when the snake was first being studied.
Okay, yep. So they thought they were more different in the past, and now you're kind of finding maybe not so much. Okay.
Kind of going into some scientific history. A lot of stuff during that time, especially in herpetology, was being described, obviously because they didn't have the technologies to do genetic sequencing based off of just morphological traits. So colors, variation in sizes of the different parts of the body, scale patterns.
Okay.
Things like that, features like that.
Gotcha.
And over the past, 80 years since we've gotten a lot more information, we can use genetics now to tell exactly how different populations are from each other. A lot of those, we've basically over-described a lot of species and subspecies.
Okay. Interesting.
But at the same time,
that's a cool course correction.
We have also under-described a lot. So there's this thing called a cryptid species, where you have populations that look basically identical. There's no way that like a person could like distinguish them, but based on the genetics, they are extremely different. Different enough to call different species, and they won't interbreed with each other, even if they like live in similar areas.
So did they just sort of evolve similar, like phenotype traits?
Yeah, because a lot of times they're occupying very similar habitats.
Right. Okay.
Which is why they were described as, being part of the same thing. But
that's cool.
It takes a lot of work to be able to figure that out. You need a lot of data.
Wow.
But it is really cool.
I can imagine. Yeah, that is very cool. Okay. Wow. I knew none of that in terms of that being specifically what you were doing. Herpetology, is that sort of, so I didn't even know what that word was until your bachelorette party, and everyone was saying herps and herps. I'm like, what the fuck are these idiots talking about? And then I asked
it's
someone.
Unfortunate that that's what it is called, because it comes from the same root as herpes does.
Okay.
So it comes from the Greek herpeton, which means creeping, crawling thing. And
that's sick.
So basically, that's what people think of reptiles and amphibians, especially like Linnaeus, who's like the father of modern taxonomy and like a lot of that. He like absolutely hated reptiles and amphibians. He thought they were like the basest, lowest creatures on Earth. So that's probably a little bit why they chose like creeping, crawling thing as the root for the study of them. So
okay. And
it's also kind of weird that they're stuck together because they're not really, like, amphibians and reptiles are not very closely related on the tree of life. Do
you know what their common ancestor is?
Their common ancestor would go all the way back to I guess not Tiktaalik, but Tiktaalik would be in there.
What's that? What Tiktaalik.
It's the famous fossil of the first kind of fish who was able to walk out of the ocean.
The OG?
He's the OG
let's go
quadruped vertebrate, like making landfall, basically.
Wait, so you're basically saying mammals are as similar to amphibians as reptiles are? If that's the common ancestor, am I getting that wrong?
So yes, it would be like they all are. I guess the common ancestor of mammals and reptiles is closer in time than between amphibians and reptiles.
Oh, interesting. And then you were saying birds are more similar to...
Yeah, birds are actually reptiles. Like birds fall phylogenetically within the clade of reptiles.
Yes.
Crocodiles are more closely related to birds than they are to turtles, for example.
Okay, gotcha.
So.
Yeah. I mean, crocs are pretty ancient. Okay, cool. Anyways, so how did you get involved in the herp game?
I've had a lifelong love of reptiles and amphibians.
I guess that's true. You have. That's true. Yeah. I didn't even really think about that.
I grew up catching frogs. Like, that was like my main activity all day in the summers, is just going
like as a kid,
the creek beside my house. Yeah, and catching frogs. And I'd keep them in a little aquarium for a couple days on my porch, and then I'd let them go, and then I'd catch them again. So I probably had a really bad impact on my small population of frogs that was living in my creek.
Sure.
Stressing them out constantly, but I just grew to love them. And unfortunately, like, near my house, we did not have hardly any snakes, because that's what I would have definitely been my preference for catching. I definitely preferred reptiles to amphibians since, like, basically the beginning. But I'm part of the generation that grew up watching Animal Planet. Like,
for sure.
The Crocodile Hunter was a huge influence on why I decided to go into this career, which I think it's probably understated how much of an impact he had on, like, specifically my generation of scientists.
Oh, I'm sure.
Especially female scientists. Like people think, oh, like it's not a girl thing, but like all the herpetologists that are my age that work with herps are like, yep, Steve Irwin is the reason I'm doing this today. So
Interesting. That's so cool. I mean, so obviously you and I are the same generation, and I grew up watching Crocodile Hunter as well, and a lot of Animal Planet, especially with my dad. But I never, obviously, I didn't go that way career wise, so I didn't really think about that in terms of being an inspiration. But obviously, it would be like that was such a big show. Oh, that's so cool. So, were you super bummed when he died, Steve Irwin?
Yeah, my mom didn't want to tell me about it.
Oh, so it was like a big deal in the house.
It was a pretty big deal. It was very shocking, of course.
Do you remember how old we were?
I think I was in 5th grade, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was 5th grade.
05, 06. That's when that would have been.
It would have been, the anniversary of it would have just been like the beginning of the month. Cause I think it was around Labor Day, when it happened.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Cause I think I found out about it on Labor Day. Cause there's obviously a huge time difference between Australia and the US.
Right.
So
true.
I remember walking into my parents' room where my mom was like laying on the bed and she had the TV on, and I heard his name on the TV, and I was like, I turned to the TV to look, and she's like, she muted it real quick. And I was like, wait, what the heck are you doing? Like, I want to hear this. And she's like, she had like a long pause, and then she decided, okay, I've got to tell you something. And so she told me what was going on. We watched the TV, and obviously I was super upset. Like watching your hero be struck down in his prime, basically.
Yeah, literally. Like actually struck down.
Yeah, and also thinking about like knowing how close like his family was and how important his children were to him, and like thinking about, because Bindi was like, she's a lot younger than I am, but also relatively close in age. And thinking about what that would have felt like for her was.
Oh, I'm sure it was terrible. Have you seen the clips of him where he talks about? I've seen one recently where he just talked about his great purpose in life was to pass on what he does to his kids, and he couldn't think of anything better than that. And the clip ended just showing further clips of his kids just continuing on the legacy and being overall just goats. And sort of during that thing, it's pretty awesome to see.
Yeah, he was definitely successful achieving that, as far as, and not just his own kids, like inspiring kids all over the world to carry on his legacy. So
yeah, very much a net positive impact. Net positive for sure. Oh, well, that's cool. Do you remember I can't remember what it was called, but there was a show on Animal Planet where it was like top 10 whatever.
Most extreme. I was just thinking about this the other day.
Yes.
I was like, I gotta talk about the most extreme.
Yes.
On this podcast.
Dude. That was my dad and I's favorite show
I fucking love that show.
Oh, it's so good. And number one. The announcer was the same every time. It was so good.
Yeah. And like, I loved their animations of the people that they would do, like comparing them to the animals.
Yes,
like, some of them were just so silly and wild. Like, I remember the one with like the flea, where they had like the person jumping like a flea. It's like, it's equivalent to like you jumping as high as a skyscraper. It's like, this just looks silly the way that they've animated this.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, that show was awesome. That and the Crocodile Hunter were the two shows I really remember from Animal Planet. Is Animal Planet still a thing?
It is, but I think it's kind of gone the way of the History Channel a little bit, where it's less about the history or the animals and more about just like, what kind of content can we make that it's just going to get like, it's kind of adjacent, but we'll get the most viewers.
Gotcha.
Obviously, History Channel has made a hard pivot into like the ancient alien stuff.
Sure. Yeah, I watched a lot of that with my dad too.
But I'm sure there's still really good programming on Animal Planet. I just haven't It's cable, and nobody has cable anymore. So
Yeah, I couldn't. Yeah, that's right. I couldn't tell you. Was Vikings on History Channel? Because I feel like that
yes,
was
it
also
was. Yeah,
okay. Right. I think that's another example where it's like a historical fiction show
yeah,
on the History Channel. I mean, the show was pretty solid. I saw the first couple
yeah.
seasons,
I
but
actually I love that show, but
I watched it with you for the
yeah,
first
it's
time.
kind of based on mythology, and they don't really even. I mean, they use historical figures that are more like kind of mythical figures. You're not really sure if like Ragnar Lothbrok was actually a real guy.
Hmm.
But they also changed a bunch of things, and like they would take a character that was not canonically like related to this person, and they'd put him in there and have him,
Oh, okay,
you know.
gotcha. Some liberties, historical fiction. It's
Yes,
all good.
artistic liberties, but
Yeah,
then again, like who can really say what was actually the truth about what was happening back then? So
one
it's
hundred
just like a
percent.
show based on mythology,
Yeah,
basically. So
yeah. I like in that show. I think even in the first episode, Ragnar and then like his bro are killing some fools, and they sort of see like a flash of Odin walking in the background, but then it like flashes away. It's like, was he there? Was he not? And I kind of like that take on mythology where it's like sort of, if you believe it's there, it's there. And if it's not, then well, they believe it's there, but it's not like the gods are duking it out per se. It's not like a show about gods.
yeah,
It's just like sort of in the background. And I thought that was a
yeah,
solid,
and
solid
they're
take.
seeing like different things, like that could have like a regular explanation, but it's like because of that religion that they have, it's like they're
Hmm.
they're seeing it with a different twist. Like when they see the ravens or something flying around, it's like, oh,
Sure.
Odin's close.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas just like it's just birds.
Yeah,
They're
right.
just
Or
doing
it's
bird
just
things.
birds. Yeah, I think there was one where they're in a storm, and it's like they're looking out the window, and they're on this boat, and then all of a sudden there's the world serpent, and then the I think someone gets taken or whatever, and it's like, oh, you could say that's what it was, but I like that. I mean, I just like the inclusion of that sort of thing.
Yeah,
Um,
it
what was
helps
it?
you like get yourself culturally in the mindset of the show too.
Yes,
Um,
right,
like
exactly.
you want to feel like you're kind of experiencing what they're
How they would
you know
experience it.
how they would experience life and stuff. So
Yeah, yeah.
helps you
They're
relate to the characters.
yeah the when they go and they kidnap that sort of monk dude, and he's like a,
Yes,
a monastery
Ethelstan.
guy. Yeah. And a couple episodes later they all do shrooms together, and it's either while they're tripping or after they're tripping. I can't remember who says it to him, but they're like, do you believe in your god now? And he's like, no. I was just freaking out watching all you guys freak out, and just had like a terrible time. I thought that was hilarious. I'm like, yeah, that's
Yeah,
pretty accurate.
yeah, they did a good job. Like a lot of movies and stuff like showcase that kind of thing, like so like over the top. But I think that they're like the way that they did it was pretty good.
Yes,
Like it's
yeah, I
never
thought it
going
was
to be
solid.
accurate, I'm sure, but
No, well, maybe with like the AI visualizers that we have now, you could probably get pretty close.
maybe. But like the computer can't see, so somebody still has to be putting it like
True.
into the computer, and so that's the same as like animating it
Yeah, very
themselves.
true.
I feel
Very
like.
true. That's very true. Um, okay, so we covered a good amount of the past, and like you said, you're in Nevada, and what is your main focus now?
Um, my main focus now is, well, obviously, like when you finish up your master's, it's not like finished,
Oh, really?
because you do, well, at least for me, it isn't. For a lot of people, it's not. Some
Okay.
people it is. If they
Okay.
don't have the
Okay.
intention of publishing their work with a journal, then
Okay.
that's kind of like they're done after their thesis is turned in, which would be super nice. But
Sure.
not the
Sure.
case for me.
Uh-huh.
So I have more data that's going to be coming in, and I'll be basically reanalyzing everything using the full data set of both sets of samples. And from that, I'm going to publish in a peer-reviewed journal based off of what I find, which I assume will be similar to what the first lane of sequences told me. But then again, maybe a couple weird individuals were in that first set of samples, and so having the larger data set will kind of elucidate some things.
Mhm.
But
Do you know what journal you would try and get it published in?
That's a good question. Some that were like floating around were like molecular ecology or potentially like conservation biology, since the Lake Erie water snake is formerly federally threatened species. So recovery, research on species or subspecies that have recovered and been delisted is always interesting and from a conservation perspective. But
sure, that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's gonna probably depend on the advice I get from my advisors too, because this will be my first time publishing.
Nice.
So,
would you be interested in contributing to more research and continue to publish over the course of your life?
Definitely, but it'll be more geared towards what I'm doing now, which is not population genetics. Mm-hmm. It's more wildlife management, and kind of going back to population ecology a little bit, but it's very different than what I was doing as my master's, especially because my job kind of encompasses all the animals, all kingdom Animalia within.
Sure, yeah, a lot more broad strokes.
Areas.
Yeah.
So it's been a definite learning curve for me, especially moving to a completely different biome, having to learn all kinds of new things, not just like about what animals are living here, because obviously the Mojave Desert is well known. You learn about it in your undergrad and stuff because it's such kind of like a counterintuitively very biodiverse area. So even though it's like a desert and it's desolate, it's one of the driest places on Earth, and it's also like teeming with life. So
it finds a way.
Yes, there's a lot of cool things that live here. And that's also part of the reason why there's so many different species that live here, is because like even small little pockets of resources, they can't travel between each other because there's just desert between them. So
you got to stick to where the goods are at.
Yeah. So you're, isolated where you're at with your little population for hundreds of thousands of years, and then you become a new thing.
Sick. Basically. Yeah, that's a good point. So what would you say your main objective is?
So going back to your episode with Casey, she talked about the National Environmental Policy Act. A lot of what I do has to do with that. So
look at this continued education. I'm stoked.
Yes.
All right. This is great. Okay, cool.
So with NEPA, it's basically in law that you under any federal like undertaking. So basically that means if the government is going to do like a certain action, if the government is going to let somebody do a certain action on public lands, if the government's involved in any way in something happening, there's got to be some kind of environmental assessment that goes into like making sure that everything complies with all of these different environmental regulations that we have. So my part in a lot of this is, say we want to build a new trail, I would need to provide my input as a resource specialist, specifically on wildlife issues, to make sure that we're doing that in compliance with all of the regulations regarding wildlife, and to make sure that we're having as minimal of a negative impact as possible on the things that live in that area. And also, I guess, reevaluating that over time too. So if we decide to put in a certain trail in an area that is having a negative impact with visitors being able to access that area, then it can be reevaluated and the trail can be closed for wildlife issues. If I find that there's like a negative impact that's happening, that means we're not complying with what we're supposed to be doing as a government agency.
How do you determine if something's having a negative impact or not? Like, what are your tools?
So a lot of it's just monitoring. So rather than having like you can have like remote sensing stuff, but a lot of it's just me going out there, looking at stuff, and giving my professional opinion about it.
This is bad. This is good.
Yeah. Like, I'm noticing this. This is going to have this continuing effect. And then, depending on, like, the action, like, if it's a really large-scale action, it requires, like, formal, like, data analysis and, like, a formal study to say that before anything really changes. But with something that's discretionary kind of thing on the federal government, then sometimes you can just go out and say, hey, this isn't working. Let's try to find a new solution that's going to avoid these negative impacts.
Cool. Okay, gotcha. So what if someone wanted, so like if I'm going to go to your park or whatever, and
conservation area,
thank you. If I'm going to go to your conservation area and I put in the suggestion box, I think there should be a new trail over here. Let's just pretend. What would the process be of trying to figure out if this is a good idea or not? Like, is there any sort of conservation area user input that you take in? Like, do you deal with people at all? Or are there people that deal with people? Okay, gotcha.
Usually it's more like organizations rather than like individuals. So for example, if we had like the local mountain biking club like request you know, we got like a new trail or had some trail work done to make the trail, you know, that's more mountain bike friendly, or have like more features that they want to see, like jumps or something.
Sure.
I don't know if we're allowed to actually have jumps. It might be a liability thing, but we do work with groups like that to try to obviously make the recreation experience of the conservation area as good as possible too, because that is also a resource for public lands. The Bureau of Land Management is different than the Park Service or the Forest Service in the way we manage public lands, because we are under a multiple use mandate, which means that you've got all kinds of different things that our managed lands can be used for. So they can be used for grazing. You can have grazing rights for your livestock be on public lands. People can request mining rights on our lands. They can request to build solar facilities on our lands, but we also have conservation lands and recreation that people use BLM for. So we kind of have a different way of managing our public lands than others. So we take into account, not that the other agencies don't, but we definitely take into account different stakeholders in our, I guess, outlook.
Okay.
Things.
Nice. Yeah. Okay.
In our decision making.
So you'll laugh at this. While you're talking to Bureau of Land Management, when you text me and you said BLM earlier, I was like, what the fuck is she talking about?
It's everyone's reaction.
Yeah. Well, in a post-2020 world, for sure.
Yeah. My mom actually, a funny story. My mom actually last Christmas, when I had first gotten this job, because I got the word that I was going to be hired in the beginning of December. Okay. She got me a shirt that said, "No, not that BLM," and I was like, "You're returning this right now. I'm never wearing this. I'm literally married to a black man. Of course, I support BLM. I'm not gonna,
that is
walk
so
around in this shirt
funny.
that implies that I don't."
You almost would have to wear that shirt and then also a BLM hat. Just be like both.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's so funny. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I'm sure. Did she think it was funny, or was she being dead ass?
She thought it was funny, but
okay.
My parents are very conservative. So.
Sure. Yeah. That sounds about right. Okay, so what's the plan as far as this gig you've got right now? Are you signed on for a certain amount of time, or is it a contract, or how's that work?
One of the great things about the federal government, especially as like a scientist, and like in my field in particular, like finding a job that is like steady and has like really good benefits and good pay is like very hard to come by, just because of there's a lot of factors that go into it. But one thing is that there's varying levels of funding for research and stuff. And so it can be hard to find a stable position that isn't just, it's funded for a couple of years, but then after that you might lose your funding and then have to go find something else to do. Whereas if you have a government position, and especially within Bureau of Land Management, we're one of 2 government agencies that actually make money annually.
Let's go.
It's us and the IRS. We make more
Wait,
money
are you
than
kidding
we
me?
spend. Yeah.
Wow, that's too funny.
I'm dead ass.
That's awesome. Good for you.
So being a wildlife biologist within the BLM is pretty good as far as like funding goes. And also you have obviously your protections as a federal employee, but also just your ability to do different things. There's always different grants that you can apply for that can sometimes be like hundreds of thousands of dollars to do a specific project at, where you work in your district. And while they're competitive, it's like, they want to give it to somebody. They don't want to just sit there. So
gotcha.
You can apply to do some really cool things. And you can also work with academia as well. So if you know like any researchers in like local universities, you can like hit them up and say, hey, would you want to come do a study out here on, this particular thing, or really whatever you want to do. And we can apply for federal money to be able to fund you to do that. Come out here and do it.
Regardless of university?
Yeah.
Oh, that's sick.
Yeah, we actually have people doing research in Red Rock from Miami University in Ohio.
Oh, get out. How would they go about doing that? Would that just be like, is there like some sort of website they go to, or?
No, I think it's like, I haven't gone through the process yet. I just know that there is a process.
Okay.
But I think it would be like somebody internally that's kind of like helping them through the application process. Okay. And it also might be that like I myself would apply on their behalf or something. Because then it would demonstrate that like we have a like desire to see this kind of data. It's not just like some guy who wants to come do this. It's like here's like the reasons why this would be good for our district to have this information.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, there's a little bit of a filter there, so it's not just like some sort of random riffraff running about.
Although like there's money to go around, so I'm sure that there's programs that you can just, as long as your proposal's like compelling, then they'll give you the money to do the research. Because that's part of like the using our public lands for the public good is allowing people to come and squeeze as much scientific knowledge as they can out of it.
Yeah, definitely. So what is the thing that you are getting the most out of this? Like, what is most rewarding about what you're doing for work right now?
It's really rewarding to have a work-life balance for the first time in like 3 years.
Sure.
That's like the main thing. Like, obviously that doesn't really have to do with my
day-to-day no, that's okay
stuff, but that's been super, super nice. It's only been like a month and a half since I did my defense, so I'm still getting used to what my life looks like without having to like constantly, especially because like I started my job before I finished. So for several months, I was just going to work and then coming home and doing more work for my thesis. Yeah. So that was really rough. I am somebody who like really thrives with a like exteriorly imposed schedule, but I don't like being on a schedule. So it's been hard to adjust.
How does that work?
Post thesis. Well, it kind of goes back to my ADHD, which I was, diagnosed relatively late in life. I was diagnosed at 26. I'm 29 right now.
29?
Yep. And one of the, like, I guess most eye-opening things about it is just being able to say, oh, this isn't just because, like, I'm a failure person. It's because my brain actually works, like, a different way than most people's. Whereas for most of my life, I just believed that I was lazy and, like, or was told that I was lazy. Like, I didn't feel like I was lazy, but I was told that I was being lazy for not, you know, having self-discipline in certain areas of my life.
Who told you were lazy?
But obviously your parents and stuff, it's like, oh, like, you know, your room's always like a disaster, like, things
like
like
for
that.
stuff like that, like for room stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, can I share something with you real quick? I don't know if I've ever told this to you. So when we lived together, you know, obviously we had a lot of roommates, and people who have listened to this podcast thus far, most of them are probably those people, but also, you know, that we've had some of those folks on, namely my sister-in-law and Sam. But when we lived together, there were, you know, anywhere from 11 to 12 of us. And this is no shade on anyone else, but I looked up to you the most, and I looked up to our friend Eli the most. And then the reason
a dichotomy there.
Yeah, right. And I'll give my, I don't know, I don't think I've ever told, I might have told this to Eli, but I'll give my reasons. So, and that's why, like, me thinking of you as lazy is just like, that has never even crossed my mind. I know you like to hang out and chill. And
that's why I wasn't diagnosed until 26. It's because
I'm not the one to.
I could, yeah. But like, even for me, like, I didn't suspect that there was anything, you know, in that capacity until I was like, I probably started to realize at like 23, like shortly after graduating undergrad.
Okay, gotcha.
It's like, hey, other people don't really struggle with this, and I can't seem to do it. And that's also one of the features of ADHD in women specifically, is that it gets worse with time, whereas with men, it doesn't. That trend doesn't seem to be the case.
Oh, this is very interesting. Well, so the reason I looked up to you so much was because you had this ability when we were all goofing around, having a good time. You had this ability, like on Saturdays and Sundays, you would go in your room and you would just go like tunnel vision, and you would just, and I don't know what you were doing in there, but you know, you would just pound out your schoolwork, and you would get an awesome GPA. And then, and there were many times, I know me specifically, like, are you sure you want to go back there? Are you sure you don't want to? So I'm just like a negative influence for sure. And you did so well. And then, but when it was time for you to be done, you would come out, and then you would do all the same stupid stuff that the rest of us were doing. But then you could operate on a higher level and still get your school stuff done and do it well. And so I always looked up for you for that. And then Eli looked up to, just because, despite him being like a diehard socialist, refuses help from everyone, no matter the cost, no matter how terrible he's doing. He only wants
it from the government. He doesn't want it from anyone else.
Right.
He won't accept it from anyone else.
I know, exactly. Despite all of that, he would just like go through some of the most challenging and difficult and dire circumstances and just absolutely just raw dog it solo. And I was just like, I don't know how you do that. And it was probably dumb, but I admired his willingness to stick with the fact that he was just going to stick it out solo.
Definitely a tenacious person.
Yes. And so I definitely want you to get back on track with what you were saying, but I don't think I ever told you that. And so when I graduated, and especially my 5th year when you guys were gone, and I was like, all right, it's time to get out of here, I was like, be like Marissa, sit down and do your homework. Be like Marissa. I was trying to channel you to get out of there. But that's interesting, going back to the ADHD thing, that it gets worse in women over time. What are the, how would you describe the symptoms of what you experienced with it? And then what made you kind of want to seek out assistance?
So I've had problems with what's called executive functioning since I was a child, but because I was so strong.
What's executive function?
In school, I'll get to that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
But because I was like so good academically, it kind of flew under the radar. Executive functioning is basically doing the things that you know you should do, that you need to do, just to basically have your brain operate so that you could do the things you need to do. So everything from like, you know, I know I need to take a shower every day. I know I need to like do certain like cleaning tasks around the house. I've got to like do my work stuff. I've got to like get up at a certain time in the morning to be able to plan out my day. It's basically like the how to run your life effectively. I've always struggled with certain aspects of that. So I was never on time for things. So not like as extreme of time blindness as some other people struggle with, but definitely like every morning, especially after my brother got his driver's license and he would be responsible for driving me to school, like it was a fight because I was never on time for when we needed to leave. And my room was always a wreck, still is a wreck to this day. I struggle with like motivating myself to do those kinds of tasks. And like for the longest time, because, you know, I was told, oh, you just like, you're not really trying. Like, it's not like a motivation thing. It's like your brain, there's a mental block from like doing it. Like, and especially through time, this has gotten a lot worse. When I was younger, I could like drag myself to do stuff a little bit easier than I can now. Sometimes it's like I get anxiety of like, okay, I have to do this, but then that anxiety becomes like a block from me actually being able
like
to
crippling,
do it.
where you're like, you're so anxious about having to do it, you just don't do it.
Yeah, it's like kind of becoming, it's like paralysis almost, where you can't like just bring yourself to do it. And it's very, like, even to this day, I struggle with it because it's like thinking about like the lazy, like unmotivated kind of labels that were put on me and also that I put on myself. And it's like, why can't I just do this? Like, it's so easy. Like, it will take me 5 seconds if I just go do it. But yeah, so that struggle has become harder over time, unfortunately. But I really started noticing it when I worked in the brewery, actually, because obviously you'd have like a lot going on in a restaurant, especially a brand new restaurant in a very popular area of town. And I would be like on the phone during the day when it wasn't even that busy, but I could like not focus on the person speaking to me on the phone because of all of the other noise happening around me. And so that's kind of when I knew I'm like, this is probably not normal for most people to like struggle this much to be able to like just talk on the phone with somebody when you're not even like that busy in the restaurant. So that's kind of what finally pushed me to go see like a psychiatrist and get like testing done.
What did the tests they do?
It's like kind of basic things. They wanted like know your history. I didn't do like, there's like different things, I guess, at different places do. Some of them do like an actual like test where they give you like questions and ask you to do certain tasks. I didn't have to do that. It was more so just like talking about my personal history, talking about my symptoms, and then like meeting with the psychiatrist multiple times, and like they were like, yeah, this sounds exactly like ADHD.
So I've thought about that as something that, well, because I know a lot of people that have it, right? And some of them, like yourself, are, successful in the common way that maybe people would define it, and are smart and brilliant, but the symptoms can manifest also in different ways for different people, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not always consistent.
And it's like different, never mind. I lost my train of thought again.
It's all good. Well, I guess kind of what I was getting at was, and I brought this up to you one night when we were at OU, and I won't go into what was happening specifically that night, but there was a point where I looked at you and I was like, I think I have ADHD, and you were like, probably. And it's something I've thought about. And I mean, Tay makes the joke to me all the time. And like, that doesn't bother me. I'm pretty game for any sort of joke, at least directed my way. And so, but I think about that with regards to myself, because a lot of those things, I'm like, oh yeah, I relate to that. I relate to that, especially the laziness with regards to tasks, cleaning the room, that sort of thing. I just don't even find them important.
Yeah, that's another thing. It's like, if my object permanence is like shot. So if it's in a drawer, if it's behind a door, I don't see it. I don't think about it. So like, I'll just straight up like, I see my room is messy as I'm getting ready in the morning. I leave my bedroom. It completely leaves my mind.
It's like, all the time.
And then I go to get ready for bed. It's like, oh dang, well, I could have cleaned this up today, but I completely forgot I was here.
Dude,
and then days and days and weeks go by, and I still don't do anything about it.
Dude, I swear to God, I walk in through this door, and whatever it is that I was going to do immediately leaves my mind. I'll see something else. I'll like start doing it, whatever that other thing is that I saw. I'm like, oh, that's a thing that I can do. And then like 5 minutes will go by, and I'm like, what was I didn't even do the initial thing that I came to. Yeah, what am I even trying to do here? And that happens all the time. And simple things like where I leave my water bottle, it is lost all the time. And I spend probably 3 to 5 minutes, almost a day, getting ready, looking for things that are pretty much in the immediate vicinity. Yeah. And so I guess one of my hesitancies for getting it checked out is I don't really care if I have ADHD or not. Like I accepted whether that could be a possibility 8 years ago, 10 years ago, or 8 or 9 years ago. And so I don't really care. Like it doesn't mean anything to me, but have you experienced any trade-offs? Well, first of all, are you taking anything? And one, have you experienced any trade-offs? Or two, have you experienced any trade-offs?
So there's definitely trade-offs.
Okay, because that's what scares me.
I have always been kind of like super good at having mental arguments with myself and talking myself out of doing stuff. Or like, I guess out of or into doing stuff. Especially when it comes to like getting out of bed in the morning. If I'm like super sleepy, it's like I can rationalize anything. It's like,
sure,
I could get up late today. Like I'll only need like this amount of time. I'll skip doing this, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Okay, I follow you for sure.
And I'll do that with any task. And so now that I have my diagnosis, it's a little bit easier to lean on that crutch of like, this is just how my brain works. I'm just accepting it. I'm just, I'm living my authentic self.
Sure. Right.
But obviously you can't do that. It's like a constant battle of needing to do things to be a functioning adult in society.
Yeah.
So that has definitely kind of been a trade-off because, it's just easier to talk myself out of doing the things I need to do or into doing the things that I want to do instead of doing the things I need to do.
Right.
But having access to medication and therapy as a result has been super life-changing. I take Vyvanse. I tried Adderall for a little bit. That's because Vyvanse was still under the patent, and they made me try Adderall first because there was a generic available. And Adderall made me feel like I was on meth and like I was constantly sick. I couldn't eat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like, and I was on the lowest like dose too. So
Oh,
it was
okay,
just
gotcha.
like some weird reaction my body had. It's just like I literally feel like I am strung out right now. I can't function. I'm not
Mm,
going to continue taking this.
sure.
So give me the other one. So once I got on Vyvanse and tried it, it was like big life changing. I'm on the lowest dose of Vyvanse as well, but it's just like I can just do things now instead of like sitting on the couch for like an hour, like thinking about, oh my gosh, I have to go get and do the dishes, and it's going to take me like 5 minutes, but it feels like the worst thing in the world. Like I cannot possibly bring myself to do it. I can just get up and do it, and like that's like such a simple thing, but it really has like made my life so much better just to be able to just go do things. And I also suspect that I have a sleep disorder, um, which, like, going back to like high school and college, like, I would fall asleep in class all the time. I still get good grades, but I would be out cold. Like, Anthony, who's my husband, um, he sat next to me in ornithology for like the majority of the semester. Like, we didn't really talk to each other until like towards the end of the semester, but like I'll be in class sleeping next to him every single lecture. Basically, I would fall asleep at some point in class, and like it didn't really even matter how much sleep I got the night before. Like obviously, I'm gonna be more tired if I stayed up super late. But even on days where I had gotten a good amount of sleep, and there was no reason for me to be just like doing this
Mhm.
in class, I was just falling asleep, just like all the time. And apparently, sleep disorders are commonly associated with ADHD. I haven't done a
Okay,
sleep study or anything because it sounds like a huge pain in the ass, but
sure.
having medication has helped me with that significantly.
I'm
So
sure.
I no longer hit this point in the day where it's just like I literally have to take a nap or I will like just not be able to function.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so when I'm taking my medication, I don't experience that at all. So it's been super helpful with handling that as well, and helping me to kind of conform to a more rigid sleep schedule, which has helped with the sleep stuff too.
With regards to the medication, were there any negative, like, do you experience any negative side effects or trade-offs?
Um, for me, like there was a learning curve of like knowing when I should be taking it in the morning. Because for some people it lasts. So Vyvanse is like a time release medication, so it's supposed to last for like 12 hours, is what they say. But for some people, it depends on how you metabolize it. Some people it lasts a little longer. Some people it lasts a little less time. For me, it tends to last it a little longer, and so I have to take it early enough in the day. Otherwise, I'm gonna be up super late just because I won't be able to go to sleep. But I've also kind of started taking melatonin to kind of bring the edge off. If I do take it, a little later in the day, I can still fall asleep. Even if it's still my medication's still working a little bit, melatonin helps me to just go to sleep. And then there's also um, huge change in appetite. You kind of lose your appetite when you're taking any kind of stimulant, really. So for me, it's important to take my medication with food in the morning because if
Okay,
I
sure.
don't, then like the way my body releases like those hunger hormones is it like doesn't release them. But if I do take it with food, then I'll still get hungry for lunch and
Oh,
dinner.
okay. Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah, so it's kind of weird, but I've had to learn because I've never really been a breakfast person. Um,
Sure. Okay.
I'm usually not hungry first thing in the morning, and I would typically like before getting on medication just start my day with lunch and now I have to like carry something with me because I usually wait till I get to work to take it, and
Oh, okay.
I'll have like a snack with me. But yeah,
Nice.
After that, it's been pretty smooth sailing.
And
Definitely
so,
has been a huge improvement.
okay, gotcha. And so this has been 3 years, like that you've been medicated, or
Yes.
that you found your diagnosis, or
Both.
okay.
So following my diagnosis, like they ask you, like, what kind of, how do you want to like proceed? I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Some people don't end up taking medication.
Yeah, it's whatever you want.
They want to kind of build strategies in their life and coping mechanisms to be able to basically raw dog it.
Sure.
For me, I did want kind of that immediate, like, let's try like anything. I need like immediate relief for
Uh-huh.
this because like it's
Sure.
becoming like such a debilitating thing that, I'm willing to try things.
Was it
And so,
debilitating in the sense of like just you were having a hard time with like self-worth, like just having that
oh
battle
yeah.
all the time?
So
Was that the big part?
I've struggled with anxiety and depression. Well, anxiety came later. I've had like bouts of depression since I was in my early teens.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's anxiety and depression are like very, especially in women,
Mm-hmm.
very associated with ADHD.
Okay.
Or I guess if you have ADHD, you're like, I don't know, it's a crazy percentage, like how likely you are to have anxiety and depression in addition to
Okay.
ADHD.
Okay, gotcha.
So I've struggled with that. And that was like the majority of like where my worst symptoms and like that was the major contributing factor for like my lower quality of life were those aspects. But once I started treating my ADHD, a lot of the anxiety and depression issues got less.
Oh,
And
okay.
my depression symptoms are definitely pretty associated with like what's going on in my life at that time. So being like in COVID times,
Yeah.
like not able to be working in my field, feeling like I was never going to get anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And that was definitely a major contributing factor too.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
starting to address the ADHD things and that definitely helped with all aspects of my mental health.
Nice. Well, that's great.
So
Did you feel any sort of, I don't know if stigma is the right word, but like, did you feel?
for me, it was just like relief. It's like I'm not crazy. There is something.
Gotcha. Okay, good. Good.
There was never like it was actually more like excitement, like, oh, I have an explanation for why I've struggled with these things my entire life.
Yeah,
It
the
wasn't
answer's
a
there.
character deficiency in me. It was like this natural biological thing that happens to a lot of other people. And like everyone experiences some level of issues with executive functioning,
Uh-huh.
ADHD or not. It's just the level at which it's affecting your life is the factor like that determines
Sure.
if you actually have ADHD.
Yeah.
And to be like have somebody tell me like, yes, this is bad enough to be considered like
Okay.
ADHD rather than just like you're not trying hard enough.
Okay.
Was very freeing.
Well, so I think you can imagine from my perspective, not on you, but from myself, as someone who tried zero in college, that was that's also part of the debate, and so that what it is basically what how I define my character arc post college was just okay, time to give a shit, Jake, and let's relearn how to apply yourself, recondition yourself, drop some of these bad habits, and because there's while I was able to like open my mind, we'll say, while I was in college, there were certain, I would say, regressions in terms of just being able to have my shit together, I guess. I don't know. There's a certain sort of zombification about high school where I was just while I was in high school, I was like, this can't be it. That we just go to school and we just, the bell tells us where to go, and but it also does provide a structure, and then you go to sports after, and I also had a job, and so when I had school, work, and sports, I did my best academically. I felt my best about myself and all of that. So there's something to be said about a structured environment. And then you strip that away, at least in my case, where when I got to college, I was like, finally, I can live my life how I want to, and I can just clever my way out of situations, because I've been reasonably witty and clever, but it just wasn't adding up. And so that is also where I come into conflict with the whole ADHD thing for myself personally, if it's even a thing, because I don't know to the extent that it actually impacts my life, and I don't know to the extent that it's just remnants of this old Jake that, and I kind of got over I was overly harsh on myself for a while, and I've since backed off and be like, no, dude, you had an awesome time. You were living in the moment. You had an amazing friend group. There's a lot of love and all that. So I've chilled out in terms of harshness on myself, but part of it is still, well, there's, you did 5 years at OU where you basically were doing F all. It's been, I graduated in 2018. So it's been 6 years, but there's there's a couple transition years. Like, to what extent have you been able to undo the damage that you did then? And it's kind of the game that I play with myself. So I don't know. Do you have any insight with regards to that, or am I being too hard on myself, or what?
I definitely think you're being too hard on yourself. Like, are you to where you want to be in life, as far as like, do you think that college got you to a point where you are, and are you like satisfied with that? I mean, obviously you want to continue to improve throughout
for sure
time, but like,
for sure.
So then you did like the amount that you needed to do.
Yeah. Basically. And
honestly, some of those like experiences outside of the classroom are equally, if not more important than the actual like academic experience of college. Like, that's what I kind of believe as well. And I probably went too far in the other direction. Like, now that I look back, like, did it really matter that, I, had like this idea in my mind that I could never get a B, like, that is just unacceptable. Like, oh my gosh, like I have to do everything I can to like have like over 100% in every situation that I possibly can.
Maybe you and I could have met in the middle, like, somewhere in college.
Yeah, I don't think I needed to be that extreme. I probably could have spent a couple more nights going to the bars with you guys. And, probably would have cherished those memories a lot more than, getting a couple extra percentage points on my exams.
Yeah. Well, with regards to that whole phase, like that, I completely accepted the fact that I only had the structure and, we'll call it, success that I had in high school, if you want to call it that. But because of those things, I had to go to school. I got a job. I had to go to work.
Like, for me, that external pressure is super important.
Yeah.
Even though I hate it, like, I do need some kind of like external enforcement.
Well, it helps that people rely on you.
I can't like enforce anything on myself. Like, I can't be the responsible one. Somebody else has to tell me, like, this is your schedule, and then I'm gonna be like, but it'll be better for me. In the long term.
Well, I mean,
it's externally enforced.
100%. And college was me living out how I thought my life was always going to be, and it was awesome. Like, I loved it while it was happening, but I had to learn those lessons, to then get where I am. So I actually don't regret anything, but I don't want to lean on the fact that, oh, well, you had to learn those lessons, it's okay. Where it's like, yes, but
if you were to do it again now, you would do it differently. It's not like you wouldn't change anything in the past, but if you were to do it again,
sure, yes. If I were to go into grad school, I would totally approach my scholastic endeavors in a much different way, which is good. I mean, that's how it goes. So, something I did want to ask you, because I've asked this to Sam and I've asked this to Michaela, is when you look back on OU and your time living in the house with everyone. How do you think about it when you reflect, and what did it mean to you then, and what does it mean to you now? So it's kind of a three-parter.
That is a good question.
We'll start with, what did it mean to you then? How about that? At the time, like,
to be living with all my closest friends and like having a good time, like all the time that I was at home, like it was pretty ideal. Definitely, like, we had some crazy times and crazy experiences in the house. It wasn't always like drama free, and like, in fact, because we had so many people, it was probably like a little more dramatic than the average person's experience.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
But
10 to 12 roommates.
Yeah, depending on who's dating who and stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
But I don't know. I can only look back on good memories, really. Our time living together, and I'm definitely nostalgic for that, especially like after last year when we, and 2 years ago when you and Tay got married, like all of us getting together again for your guys' wedding, and then for Anthony and I's wedding. Like every time we're like all together, I'm just like, we have to go our separate ways again. This sucks.
It sucks. It does suck. You know, I was talking to your husband, Anthony, at the last baby shower we were at, and, you know, I was checking in on him and all that, but we were just talking about life and these moments that as a kid, we're going to this baby shower, you know, I'm me as a kid, I was the same as I am now. It's like, I'm going to have a good time no matter what. But now as an adult, when I'm with you guys, because it is rare, even though it's just like and I say just like a baby shower, babies are amazing things, you know, that it's a special thing to celebrate. So everything just means more. One, because we're not together as much, and two, because these events actually hold some sort of meaning as an adult. You know, there's some generational happiness that comes from watching your friends grow up and then start the next phase of life. And these, just like the house was the good old days, that's what I was telling Anthony. I'm like, we're going to look back in 5-10 years and this was the good old days. It's all good. You know, as crazy as life can be, and, you know, screw whatever else is going on in the world at large, you know, there's always going to be crazy stuff. But
yeah,
whenever we all come together, I'm like, yeah, there's nothing else I would rather be doing. And so it's nice to have that. And what the fuck was the other part of that question? I said, what do you think? How do you
what
look
did
back
it mean
on
to
your
you
time?
then, and but what does it mean to you now? I guess.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, we don't see everyone as much. So because of that, is there? I guess you said you're a little nostalgic for those times.
Yeah, I definitely have a lot of nostalgia because it's like a simpler time. You're like with your friends like all the time. You don't have to worry about, I mean, to an extent you have to worry about paying bills, but not to the extent you have to do now. Like, now you can't be on your parents' health insurance and like all that crap, but.
Right. We aged out of that.
Yeah. But also just like the community aspect of it, especially now that we're like out here in Vegas, like it's a lot harder because we don't have any kind of support system here. And so like, it definitely means a lot when I get to see friends and do things with people in my life who I care about now, because I'm all the way out here and like in the middle of the desert all by myself with Anthony and our dog and our cat, but
snakes.
And snakes, yeah. Can't forget about the snakes.
Yeah, well, Anthony and I were talking at Nora's wedding and then again at the baby shower about him and I doing a backpacking trip out there. TBD on when that's going to happen, but we're both committed mentally and emotionally. And I know Tay really wants to find
Well, don't do it in like July or August.
Well, fuck no,
probably, yeah. You probably won't survive.
No, I'm not trying to do that. It's been a while since I've been backpacking, despite that supposedly being my major, not in backpacking, but
it's part of the outdoor rec experience.
Yes, you know? It's part of the outdoor.
There's also a lot of like Red Rock is like one of the like world's best climbing areas. So if you've seen Free Solo or heard of the documentary Free Solo,
I'm well aware of Alex
Honnold.
Honnold. Yeah.
He lives basically in one of the communities right outside of our boundaries, and climbs at Red Rock like all the time.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.
That's where he does the majority of his climbing.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I mean, I've seen part of Free Solo, and I've listened to a couple podcasts that he's on. He's a sick dude. Something I wanted to ask you about as well. So you had mentioned this right before we started. You've listened to all episodes of the pod, including the last one I just did with Mick. Thank you. First of all, I don't know if anyone has done that to my knowledge, outside of you.
You can count me on the short list. I have super enjoyed listening to all of them because it feels like I'm also in the conversation. It feels like I'm just listening to you like shoot the shit with somebody in our apartment, basically.
Oh, good.
Back in college, a little bit.
Good.
Like, obviously, more mature topics are being talked about now
sure.
on the podcast than we're talked about on the couch at our house.
Sure.
It's kind of a cool way to keep up with what you're doing and what the other people who have been your guests, which are also some of my friends, are doing.
Right. I'm curious. So it's interesting you mentioned the conversations like on the couch, because one of the things that is hard, and I talked about this with Tay's dad, was it's hard to, well, one, because I'm sort of interviewing you, right? And so I'm trying to get you to tell us about what you've got going on, and I'm trying to learn. I guess something I'm struggling with, and maybe I'm not, I don't know. Because I'm trying to, it's just hard to get your footing, because I sort of want the conversations to be a bit more like how maybe they would be on the couch at the house, where maybe there's a little bit more ranting, and I don't know about what, but sometimes I feel in the effort.
Well, you're never going to get that like on a podcast though, because people like don't say things that they might say like in private conversation that are going to be broadcast.
Well, and that's the big struggle for me, is I have to slightly rein it in a little bit, but I really don't want to, and I don't know how to. I guess it's just all going to be opportunity and depending on who I'm talking to and what we're talking about. But I just feel like I haven't been able to be fully myself and fully let loose yet. And I guess part of what I'm looking for is your opinion in terms of, do you feel like my personality is coming across in these episodes at all? Because I've also listened to all of them, obviously, but like I'll listen to them after I edit them and I put it on Spotify or whatever. I'll listen to it while I'm driving. And I have a couple of times come this close to just turning the episode off and just not listening to it.
Because you just know you're kind of like holding back too much, or...
Well, sometimes
you just don't like the sound of your own voice, kind of thing.
No, I mean, like, I'm
oh my
on a
gosh, I sounded so dumb here.
No, well, a couple of. So here's the problems I've found. Some of it is filler words, likes and that sort of thing.
So I remember from one of your episodes. I think it was the last one with Michaela. Was it the last one with Michaela where you had that like segment at the end that you recorded by yourself?
Yes, I forgot about that.
You're way too critical on like the filler words. Like I don't notice it at all. When I'm listening to it, it's not over the top at all.
Okay,
it sounds very conversational, because like when you're having a conversation with somebody, like you're not paying attention to if you're saying too many times or anything like that. So it sounds very natural to me.
Okay,
I know you're probably picking up on it as you're listening to it, because obviously as the creator of something, you're going to be hypercritical of what you're putting out.
Sure.
But to me, I don't notice it at all.
Well, that's good. But my dad asked me the other day when he was over, he's like, what's the goal of you doing this? And I have a couple goals. Like if you listen to if you listen to the Balls Deep one when I was in Denver, and I talked about, doing the pump and run in March, part of the Arnold Classic thing. And, it would be cool if I could leverage this. And then if I was successful in that, to maybe help sell like what I did to be successful at that. And so that would be cool to sort of use this as a tool for that. And I was also able to use the podcast as a tool for my fundraising when I did the kayak and the keys back in May. So that was a plus. But at the end of the day, I just, like I've said a couple times in previous episodes, the regret of not doing something was overpowering my fear of doing the thing. And now that I'm doing it, I guess I want people to listen, and I want more to listen because I think I have a lot of cool friends. And I also want it to be worth people's time. You know, I'm not paying you to do this, obviously.
Yeah.
I want it, I want it to be worth people's time, and maybe people have something that, you know, they want people to learn about. Or wouldn't it be cool if people heard this, Marissa, and they're like, and you're their Steve Irwin or some sort of thing. And it doesn't matter the, you know, the sort of the size, but I guess that's the goal, is showcase my friends. And so that, one, it helps my friends stay accountable with the things they talked about. And two, maybe they come back and they're doing better. And three, you're also kind of watching my journey in this. And so, but there's no like end goal. And also I only do this twice a week. So it's hard to get better and what is better, because I'm already a pretty good conversationalist. So I don't know. That's sort of my, I wanted to talk to you about it.
I think that like all of like the content of the podcast, excellent. Like even like listening to like your early podcast, I'm like, wow, he's doing like a really good job of like directing the conversation and asking questions. Like you're a good interviewer in addition to like being a conversationalist. But the audio mixing, you got to fix the audio mixing on some of those.
For sure.
I'm sure that's really hard to do, especially because like most podcasts have like teams of people who are like listening as it's being recorded so they can fix issues like as they're happening. Mm-hmm. Whereas like you on your own, it's like you're in the podcast, so it's not always easy to see that there's like audio things going on.
Oh yeah.
But then like, I don't even know what you would do after the fact to like, if somebody like your other person's mic is low and then yours is like normal, like how would you even do that?
So for the Denver one, I posted it and then I started listening to it in my car. And I was like, what the fuck? This sounds like such ass. And so
it's because you guys were all like
we were all far back.
And Hopwood, I forget what your friend's name is. And
he had one of these. Yeah, Daniel Hopwood. He had one of these microphones right up here like I do now. And the three of us had one microphone sitting way back. So I literally went through and had to enhance all of our pump the volume up on all of our sections and tone it down on all of his sections. And so I re-uploaded it because I got in the car and I was just like having to adjust the volume.
I'm going deaf
with the speaker. And so I think that's what ends up happening in general with most of these, is they end up being a little quiet. And so I'm listening, my volume goes up to 30, whatever that means in my car. And I'm usually at like 28, 29 cranking these. And so I'm just like pissed while I'm listening to it. Not because I can't hear it, but because I'm like, it has to be all the way turned up. And so I'm just having a bad time.
Well, that doesn't matter to me as much as like the consistency of the audio. So it's like, okay, I'm turning it up so I can hear like the quieter person. And then like my eardrums are being blown out by like the other person. That's my only like technical, I guess.
Do you know which one it was the worst on?
Constructive criticism. It was probably that one. But I mean, it's like,
gotcha.
I automatically knew what the issue was because I had seen like your Instagram reels. I'm like, yeah, it's because he's on the Zoom and it has his microphone up, and then you guys are all just way back, just chilling. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. That was fun to record, but yeah, it's just tough. And that's something else I was talking about with Tay's dad is just, and if you listen to
I'm sure that's like such a learning curve too. It's like you have to kind of make the mistakes before you figure out, like here's how this can be done better in a way.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, going forward as much as I can, you can rent for free rooms in the library. So just, first of all, minimizing noise on my part. You probably heard June a couple of times in the background. I mean, I can't go rent a space right now. And so that's challenging. And then, the people I'm interviewing, whether it's yourself or Casey or whoever, typically don't have this mic. And then so when I'm editing, I'm kind of just like, lazy is not a bad word. I just am pressed for time. And half the time I do these, it's Sunday, and I have to then edit it and then get it out because I've said that's what I'm doing, and I'm an idiot.
I think you're also hard on yourself there. With like, I know you want to keep like your schedule, and that's super important, but like you also have to give yourself some grace. Like things come up, and I don't think it's the worst thing in the world if you have a late podcast every once in a while.
I know it's not, and it would probably be better if it was just better quality. If it meant being 2 or 3 days late, but I took the time and maybe adjusted some audio here and there.
The people who are listening also are like not going to be like pissed at you. They're going to be like, oh yeah, like
he took the time and made it better for us. Yeah.
That too, but they're going to be understanding. And like if you think about like giant content creators all the time are like, oh yeah, sorry, I got this video up a couple days late. But then they're just like, whatever.
And that's that. Yeah.
And their fans they're like giant swaths of fans are like, not like on a hate train immediately. Like, you uploaded 2 days late.
Yeah, you piece of, yeah.
They're like, oh dang, this is so funny. Thanks for putting your time into this.
Yeah, for sure. No, you're probably right on that one. It's just there's also the inconsistency of when we do this. It wasn't an issue as much because initially the recordings were happening like a week to 10 days before I would release. So I had plenty of time to, edit if I needed to, but now it just totally varies when these happen. And so I'm thrilled because this is Saturday. It'll go up tomorrow, but I'll have time tomorrow to, check both of our audios and make sure, that it's solid, and I'll probably bump them up a little bit. Cause I think that, so when I take this out of the little studio we use, I put it in iMovie because it's easy. You have better editing tools. And I think I just need to bump up the audio in general. But we'll see. Well, I appreciate the feedback. I didn't know that you would listen to all of them until literally right beforehand. And so I was like, I got to ask her about all that. That'll be good. Thank you again for listening to all of these. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. I've really enjoyed listening to them. Gives me something, and it's like usually the perfect length for me to like listen to on my way to work and then on my way home from work.
How long does it take you to get to work?
So in the morning it's like usually like half an hour to 40 minutes depending on traffic, and then on the way home it's usually half an hour. It's not as bad on the way home.
Nice.
But yeah, and some of your longer episodes, I can stretch those into 2 days of commutes. But
sure. Do you listen to podcasts much?
That is usually what I listen to in the car, like when I'm like going to and from work. Occasionally I'll do music, but like I have a couple podcasts that I listen to.
Nice.
Yours being one of them. I listen to Office Hours Live with Tim Heidecker.
What's that? And who's that?
So have you heard of Tim and Eric? Like the comedy
Yes.
duo?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, so, I knew you liked Tim and Eric. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
Nice. Gotcha.
So I listen to that.
Okay. Nice.
And I'll occasionally like listen to like Theo Vaughn's podcast if there's somebody on there who's
hilarious.
Cool. Yeah. Loved his episode with Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, that was good. I saw part of that. Tay loves Theo Vaughn.
And his one with Brittany Broski. Like his podcast with Brittany Broski was so funny.
Tay loves Brittany Broski. That's been that's been a new discovery of Tay's, is Brittany Broski, and
she's so funny.
I think she's pretty funny. There's a couple of times where I'm like, okay, this is hella self-indulgent on your end for you to just put this on the mic and have me listen to it. But for the most part, I think she is so funny, and her train of thought is good. And what's the one she does where she's like a queen and she'll have guests on? I don't know if you've seen that show. She had like one of the Sprouse Bros on there.
I know what you're talking about, but I have not watched any of those like individual. Like I've seen clips from it, but I've not watched any of the episodes. But that might be the next one I delve into.
Yeah, which one's the one from Riverdale? Cole or Dylan Sprouse?
I think it's Cole.
Okay, well he was on. He was on, and I watched that entire one.
I did see that clip.
So funny.
Oh yeah, very funny.
Yeah, so I do like her. So Brittany Broski, Theo Vaughn, Tim, who else?
That's pretty much it.
Nice.
I don't keep up with many of the other podcasts. I used to listen to Joe Rogan, and then, well, lots of things happened with Joe Rogan that I didn't agree with. So
sure, yeah,
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know if in an effort to keep what we talked about before the podcast, did you watch his new stand-up at all? I didn't know if you were just like not gonna watch anything he did. I was thinking about you the entire time.
I saw clips, or I saw like a couple clips of it, but mostly that was like, so Tim is not like a huge Joe Rogan fan, or like,
okay.
He actually several years ago did his own stand-up special that was like spoofing those types of stand-up comedians.
Oh, really? Oh, nice.
It's very funny satire.
Uh-huh.
But he like brought up a couple of the clips and talked about it on the podcast. And
okay, gotcha.
But
yeah. Where Tay was somewhere with June. Oh, we had a family reunion not too long ago, but I had a work event, and so Tay went the day before I did, and so I had the house to myself. And I'd asked if Tay wanted to watch it. She's like, "Yeah, I think that's going to be more of a you thing." And I watched it, and I thought it was funny, but I texted Tay while I was watching it. I'm like, "This is definitely it's definitely a good one for you to miss." Yeah, definitely a good one for you to miss.
I just can only take so many jokes about the woke, and like it's like
sure.
Okay.
Sure.
I think that got a little tired a couple years ago, but
gotcha.
By all means,
it's
creative vision.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing about stand-up. It's like, it's just another art form, which is weird. There's so many different things out there. Cool. Well, first of all, would you do this again ever?
Absolutely. It's a fun time.
Good. We're hitting about the 2-hour mark, and I feel like that's pretty solid. I feel like we had some good conversation. Is there anything that you wanted to end with, or is there anything you want people to follow you on? Or is there anything you want people to check out on the conservation side? Follow your conservation area? Is there anything you want to ask people to do?
That's a good question. Support climate change initiatives. That's my number one. Like, now that I'm out here in the desert, I would like to continue having water to drink and not like burning to death. So, especially now that I live here, please, pay attention to those issues. But also for everyone's sake, not just in, especially like America is probably going to be the last to feel the major effects of, at least on like a human level. A lot of, the poor countries in the world are going to be feeling this. They're already feeling it. And there's going to be lots of issues for conservation as well. So support your local conservation initiatives. And yeah, that's, I guess, my plug. I don't have any like major social media stuff that I do. So
it's all good. Awesome. Cool. Well, we can say goodbye offline, but thank you everyone for listening. Shout out Marissa for hopping on the pod, and we'll see you in a couple weeks for the next one. Later.